Hey folks, David here with Tomb Runner's Designer Diary, whatever number. It's been a couple weeks. I've been really heads down in the weeds of working on things, and I wanted to give um, some small and big updates to where we stand with the game and everything. As we get very close here, a couple weeks out from Kickstarter launch, wrapping up some things, and want to share some additions to the book, the latest prototype of the Zine edition, as well as the big change to the game that I've been experimenting with and playtesting. So you've seen the deluxe hardcover. This is the 150-page edition with everything, plus it'll have 50-ish pre-made tombs to run adventures in. Nice, solid, thick, well-made book. This is the gloss one, and as I keep saying, the final one will probably be matte finish instead of gloss, because the matte will just fit the aesthetic and feel a little better, feel more like an old book, which is kind of the aesthetic we're going for. And this is the Zine edition. This is the soft cover. This is what the game originally started out as a zine project to be kind of transparent. I thought it was going to be this is Cairn 1E, the first edition of Cairn, and it's like 18 pages. Is it 18? 19 with the character sheet. 20. Yeah, it's right at 20 pages with the little splash art at the end there. And this was what really inspired me to put this game to paper. And I thought, I can make a zine. I've been involved in various scenes and hobbies that are big into zine culture for a long time, and I really love the whole zine culture idea. So originally I thought Tomb Runners would just be a zine. So I always wanted to offer a very affordable entry point for Tomb Runners, even when I got to the point of making it a hardcover book. The differences here, obviously physically they're different, hardcover, softcover. The paper is going to be better. The print quality is going to be better on the hardcover. Everything like that is going to have all the niceties of a hard deluxe book. But content-wise, the full game will be in the Zine edition. The only thing you're not going to get here, this is 75 pages, and this is all of the game. You're not going to get any of the pre-written adventures that will come in the deluxe edition. So if you have your own adventures you want to run, you want to make your own campaigns and your own tombs, this is all you need. If you want to run adventures from other games, this is a universal system. You can easily pull them in and run them with no prep. This is all you need. Now, of course, I would love you to get the deluxe edition, but I would rather sell 1,000 of these than 500 of these, just because it would mean more people are enjoying the game and seeing the system and everything. Price-wise, it's going to be significantly cheaper. Of course, it's going to be probably $20 cheaper. I think this is going to land around $25, and this is going to land around $45, which for what you're getting, I think is still a very nice competitive price point. And that'll include some freebies as well, and both of those will also include the digital editions, so you'll get the PDF as well for that. They're both A5 size. This is the super common, super nice size. It'll fit in almost any bag. It's like tablet size, or smaller than tablets really. If you have an iPad mini, it's very similar to that size, and it's smaller than a full-size iPad. Lots of games are now running this. Let's see, lots of games are coming in this size now. I think this is actually 6x9. It's actually really close. Yeah, this is a little thicker and about 2 millimeters taller, but this is same size as Blades in the Dark, and I believe Shadow Dark. So this is the A5 format, and it just works really well for RPGs that aren't too huge and massive. If you're going a 400-page tome to hold there, you probably want to have a bigger size to just make it easier to handle that much content. But this size works really well for these smaller indie games, and it's also the same size for the GM screen, and it just folds out to 3 panels instead of 4. 3 panels. I've shown this before. This is the prototype artwork. the sketch draft of the GM screen art, and I do have the final art now. I haven't made the prototype for it, but it looks sick. I'm going to probably keep this one as my personal GM screen because I really love the sketchy pencil in style. But the final artwork is looking it looks amazing, and I can't wait to see it in print. Okay, so that's the Zine edition and an update on that. This is obviously not aligned correctly on the template. This blank space here, this should not be here. This should be full bleed down to the bottom, so I have to get that corrected, of course. But let's go over some of the things that I've added to the game here recently before I get to the big change that's going to be the bulk of this video. So in the Build a Tomb page, you have the tables for what's in the tomb, what's going on there, and then you have the description, location, domain, the title of your tomb table here. So you could have like the crumbling hive of darkness or the blighted prison of death, the veiled fort of sacrifice. You know, lots of flavorful thematic names. Let's see, the infested church of prophecy. That's a good one. So what I've added here is those two pages were a pretty good starting point, but I wanted to have more fleshed out tombs for you and more useful things during play. So I came up with 2 more pages of tables here, and these are D20, 3D20 on each page. So you have features, threats, and traps, and then sights, smells, and sounds. So some of the features, these are kind of just like things to populate your dungeons with that your players come across. And it could be things like spider webs or ice flows, a smoldering fire, flowing lava, creeping darkness, ancient runes, a locked door, a warning sign. And then threats are more direct obstacles for your players to interact with. And these are things like a nest. And, you know, that hints at an infestation of some type. Empty graves, so there's undead lurking around. Patrols, you know, whatever type of monsters are in this tomb, they're on patrol, they're on high alert. Rugged terrain, sinkholes, large tracks, so there's a large beast somewhere nearby. Toxic plant life, you know, not necessarily sentient, but still dangerous. And then traps, this is a list of 20 traps to use. Some of them are classic things like pressure plates, tripwires, pitfalls, swinging blades. But then some more interesting ones like a rolling boulder for that classic, you know, runaway, escape to safety. Or blinding light, you know, you could flashbang the players and disorient them. Or a shifting room, the room itself disorients the players and they get lost in the tomb. Or an animated statue, that's a fun one. And then the sight, sounds, and smells. This is really for flavor at the table to really create a mental image for players. And for sights, you have things like blood, a coffin, a statue, crystals, torches, obelisk, an egg, a lever, a secret door. For smells, you have rot, fire, vinegar, sulfur, mold, lilac. Lilac's an interesting one because, like, you know, that's not what you expect to smell, but that could imply something interesting happening around the corner, maybe an alchemist table or something. And then sounds. This is my favorite to use because these just paint such a thick picture for players, and their imaginations will just run wild with what they might be encountering soon. So you have sounds like clinking, chanting, banging, sloshing, hissing, knocking, whispering, rumbling, tapping, scurrying, stomping, or dripping. So these 6 tables give you a ton of things to use at the table to really flesh out your tombs for players and make them feel like a really living, dangerous, interesting place to explore. Okay, next up, so magic. The magic system hasn't changed at all. Still have the spellcasting still works the same. You still have the 50 pre-written spells that are very descriptive, not prescriptive for the schools of magic. And the rules for spells have always said players are free to create new spells within their domain, within their school, as long as it makes sense to the player and the GM to be, you know, an arcane or a nature spell or a holy spell. They can craft new spells and do interesting things with their magic and be creative with it. So I wanted to give you a tool to do that, to make that a little easier for both players and GMs. So what I've created here is the craft a spell tables. And this is inspired by things like Ars Magica, where you have a magic system that's kind of broken down to noun verb or verb noun in different combinations. Some systems do it by like spell element and spell form. The new Dungeon World 2.0 beta has a similar verb noun system with the different schools of magic, where it has a very limited list that each domain gives you, and then you can combine them to create spells. This is a very broad list. And what I did was I went through my 50 spells and broke them down into what's the spell effect and what's the spell element. So obviously things like conjure fire, that's how you do like a fireball or a flame wall or something. You can easily, obviously that one's directly broken down into conjure is the effect and fire is the element. But you also have things like mend item, so you could repair an item with magic, or radiate light. That's a good one for a cleric to have. Or radiate ice, and instead of like an ice beam or an ice ball like a fireball, the wizard could, you know, radiate ice in all directions from them. You have things like channel, quicken, radiate, reveal, blast, bind, banish, animate. So animate, corpse would obviously be necromancy. But you could also have animate item, and you could have, you know, a living sword, a living weapon. Project shield, that's a very classic defense spell that fits holy. And in the rules here, it says, when you create a new spell, write down a simple one-sentence description of it for future reference for players and the GM. So you're not just like saying 2 words, but you're really creating a spell and describing the effect the same as when you use it in play. This is really useful for the GM to give spells to monsters or create magic items, potions, scrolls, that kind of thing. It's a really fun table, and I also went through, after making this table, I went through some other games like Shadow Dark, like Cairn, Rune Cairn, Forbidden Lands. I went through some of these other games and tried to see if this table covered all of those spells in effect. And it works perfectly. There wasn't a single spell I came across where you couldn't break it down into this element and effect system. So it's very freeform, it's very creative, just like everything in Tomb Runners, but it gives you a little more guidance and a little bit of inspiration for crafting spells. You can look through and say, okay, I'm a necromancer, so what elements here fit me? Obviously plague, poison, shadow, flesh, fear, things like that. And then you can look over at the effects table and say, okay, what do I want to do with these elements? Do I want to, you know, speak fear? That's a good combination where they can cause fear with their voice. A fun one I thought of with the arcane spell was speak illusion. And that sounds kind of awkward, but I was thinking speak illusion could be using your magic to tell a very convincing lie. You're speaking an illusion. So the magic effect is that whatever you say comes out as truth to the listener. So that's the kind of inspiration I want to encourage with the Craft a Spell tables. And I also wanted to highlight this artwork. It's a public domain piece that I did some slight alterations to fit here, and I think it looks great. It really looks like a wizard, really conjuring up some new magic and new effect. I really like that piece. Okay, so that's some of the new content in the book, but let's go over the big change to Tomb Runners. So previously, the stat system. It was a very simple, you had 4 stats, and when you did an action, you chose which stat you're using and everything, and described how, if you're if you're doing an attack with brawn, obviously that you would use brawn for a melee attack with a big warhammer or a great axe. And if you're casting a spell, you would use mind or spirit if you were casting a holy spell. And the stats were just based on, you got plus on one and minus on another, which meant advantage on one and disadvantage on another. And your other two stats were just neutral. You just roll d20. The problem I was running into in playtesting, and a problem that was raised to me by playtesters, was that system heavily incentivized you to only roll your good stat. One, it's mathematically the smartest way to play. Two, this game lets you choose what you're doing, what stat you're using, because the GM never tells you, oh, roll agility or roll mind. You always say what you're doing and how, so you can always dictate what stat you're using. Let me get a sip here. So I was having playtest sessions where players would never roll their bad stat at all because rolling with disadvantage felt so punishing, and very rarely would roll their neutral stats because rolling with advantage just feels so much better. And especially with the scaling system, rolling with advantage most likely means you're not going to fail outright. So there was very little reason to ever roll anything but your positive stat, your advantage stat. So the problem with that is not only are you not, there's not really much danger if you're only rolling with advantage, but your characters were one-dimensional. If you're playing a barbarian with plus and brawn, basically all they're going to do is be a one-trick, one-dimensional character that smashes everything. And that's a little too boring of a character, and makes for a very flat gameplay if players lean into that. Now, if you make a more interesting character that's like a melee wizard, then you're naturally going to be using a little more stats and you're going to be rolling a little more variety. But this game, and players, they're going to start with things that are simple and familiar, like a thief, a rogue, a traditional rogue, or a traditional fighter, or a traditional wizard. And until they understand the system and explore what you can do with it, you might not make more creative builds that rely on multiple stats. So I tried switching it in this draft. Actually, it's already printed this way, to having a straight up plus and minus attribute system. So instead of having advantage on one stat and disadvantage on another and two neutrals, it had +2, +1, -1, -2. And that helped a bit because then it felt pretty good to use your +1. You were more likely to use at least one other stat a little bit. But in that case, you would still very rarely use your negatives. And it wasn't too much of a problem with, if you're playing a fighter, you're not going to be using mind much to cast spells if you didn't take spellcasting. That's fine. But it still led to flat play because the system is so simple otherwise. It kind of encouraged you to still lean into your one gimmick. And I really thought long and hard about how can I get players out of that. And instead of players guiding their actions by what stat gave them the best bonus, I wanted them to do what made sense in the scene and what was the coolest thing for their character to do without being tied to kind of min-maxing the math, which is kind of the point of this whole system, is to get away from, and the point of a lot of OSR games is to get away from min-maxing character builds, and to play the character intelligently and creatively. So what I ended up doing was playing a few sessions with no stats. All action rolls are just D20. You can still push by adding, you can still add a 1d6 by spending stress. You can still get advantage and disadvantage depending on situational bonuses, much like other games that use advantage and disadvantage. Conditions, feats, the GM, considering position of the players, that can grant advantage or disadvantage. So in effect, players are no longer thinking about what stat should I use here. Instead, they're thinking about what should my character do. And the result is more creative play, less staring at character sheets or playing one-dimensional characters where you only ever smash or you only ever use dexterity. Now players are doing more creative things in the scenes. They're not scared to try other things than what their one trick is, because they no longer are tied to those mechanical bonuses for stats. So you might think, oh, does that make every character the same? And the answer is no, not at all. Because now your equipment and your feats matter a lot more than your stats. And previously, your stat kind of was overshadowing the rest of your character options, because having advantage on your action rolls was kind of the most important thing, mechanically and feel-wise. Because, mechanically, the math on advantage, rolling 2d20, take the highest, works out to somewhere around a +3, if I recall correctly. And that depends on some things, but generally it's around a +3. So changing, to a +2, +3 bonus system, it doesn't seem as good. It doesn't feel as good, even though mathematically it's about the same. But, players just feel like advantage is a lot more powerful than it maybe, is in the math of things. So getting away from that, every action having advantage if you play your character that way, has really opened up the game. And now, instead of just always going for what you have advantage on, players are using their full character sheets, their full character options with their equipment and with their feats. And to counteract that mechanical power that you lose by always having advantage on one stat, what I've done is I gave you another feat at character creation. So previously you had 3, now you have 4. So your character, what defines your character flavor and power-wise is now broader and now deeper. If you want it to be, if you want to play a fighter now, you have even more thematic and mechanical expression in play, because you get to choose a whole nother feat, which adds another either deeper in your character concept option or a wider build to diversify your character. If you want to play, if you want to play a paladin that's a little bit fighter, a little bit cleric, you have an extra feat point to spend to do so. And that's especially potent for spellcasters. If you're a non-spellcaster, that's great because you just get more things to do. But if you were a spellcaster, spellcasting takes 2 feat points. And originally that was 2 of your 3. So you really only got spellcasting, which is obviously a lot, a big power and creative and narrative spike of, character build. But you only got 1 other feat to support that or diversify your character. Now you have 2 others. So in effect, it's like spellcasting only costing 1 previously. And that works really well because now you get to really flesh out your spellcaster or diversify, like I said, with a paladin or a melee caster or a death knight or anyone who wants to have spellcasting and still have a little more to their character, or just have a really good spellcaster from level 1. The other thing that I changed was now you start with 10 stress. And that is to encourage more use of stress proactively. Stress pool in this game is already a very proactive system compared to Blades in the Dark is really where stress was inspired. They call it stress as well. And the resist rolls, the spending stress to resist, or in Blades you can do flashbacks and stuff or power certain class or playbook skills with it or whatever. But I really wanted stress to be kind of an energy or a mana type resource in Tomb Runners. And that's why spellcasting costs stress. That's why all of your feats are powered by spending stress. And the game is really driven by stress more than HP. Like I've said previously, having 2 HP and 6 stress feels a lot better than having 6 HP and 2 stress. And that's by design, because the central tension of play in Tomb Runners is spending your stress up front to do cool things or saving it for defensive use with like resist rolls. And you can't restore stress during play. You can only restore stress during downtime. You can heal HP during adventuring, but you have to wait till you have an actual full rest and recovery downtime to restore your stress. So now characters from level 1 have an extra feat and more stress to spend. So even though they're losing that advantage on their core stat, you're getting more toys to play with, basically. And instead of just being stronger mathematically, you're stronger in ways that you feel and get to actually play. And that is a lot more fun from the get-go than having just better math on your dice rolls. And you still have plenty of power with dice. With having extra stress, that means you can push rolls more. You get that plus 1d6 to your action rolls. And you can roll that after the result of your action roll. So if you roll, let's say you roll an 8, you spend the 2 stress, add that 1d6, you know you're bumping up to that next tier of success and getting that success with a consequence instead of failure. So I would say the power level of characters, if you understand the game and are very proactive and aggressive with how you play, you're probably a little stronger now up front with this system than previously. And not only are you stronger if you use all the tools in your kit, you are a more diverse, you're a more fleshed out character concept with more options and more diversity from others. You can make a unique character with more flavor, more of your personal style, more creative play built into them from the start. And like, even though taking away having a statless system sounds like characters are all going to be the same, think about video game roguelikes that have no stats, no core stats. They just give you items and bonuses throughout the run. And say Dead Cells. Dead Cells, there's no character stats. You always start with the same jump and run and all that. But going with a dagger build versus like a ranged build or a shield build, a couple levels in, you feel very different, even though you have the same stats. And I know in that one you do pick up bonuses. So with like extra HP and all that stuff. But you get the point where the items you have, the abilities, the talents, the feats you have, those are going to dictate what differentiates your character and what you do with your character a lot more than just saying, oh, my character is a little stronger. And I think that's going to be a little bit, it might cause some hesitation in players to play a fantasy RPG with no stats, but it really pushes the idea of how you play your character, the items they have, what they equip, and all that matters more than their stats that they rolled up. And it makes the game more player-centric. It lets the players dictate their character more than the math. And the more I've tested this twice now, 2 sessions, the more I've played it this way, the more I enjoy it. Characters or players are no longer, like I said, they're not thinking, how can I manipulate this situation to use my good stat where I get advantage? Instead, the GM can be a lot more aggressive with giving advantage and disadvantage based on the scene and the narrative. And it doesn't feel punitive now. It feels more rewarding. Previously, if you gave disadvantage when they had advantage, now they're just rolling a 1d20, or they're getting disadvantage, they're rolling 2 and taking the low. That felt a lot worse when they were used to rolling advantage on everything. So this gets back to where the success with a consequence will be the most likely outcome instead of full-on success. It's funny, the last 2 major changes I made to the game have made it a little more punitive. I took away healing being D6 based and just made it flat to level. So level 2 healing items heal 2 HP instead of 2d6. That's a big change. But it also, now all healing goes to HP instead of being split between HP and SP at player's choice. Now you only heal SP, stress, and downtime. So that was the first big change, which made the game harder in some ways. But that was because as players played the game, they realized how strong characters were in the system, and they were able to really negate how dangerous I wanted things to be. So healing became too good, so I had to bring it back in line. And then with further playtesting, players learned, like, oh, well, why would I ever roll with disadvantage, my disadvantage stat? I can just always use my advantage stat. So to bring that down in line, I said, well, let's just get rid of stats. Instead of trying to fix the math on that, let's just get rid of stats. Your characters will act now based on what equipment they have and what feats they have to make them better at things and differentiate them from other characters. And it's working really well. I'm really, really happy with it because, like I said, characters aren't samey at all. In fact, they're more different now because they have more feats from level 1. And feats are really where all the flavor comes through in your class. The whole build your class system that wasn't dependent on stats. Stats were, just part of character creation, but class creation was about your heritage, your job, and your feats. Those were what set you apart. And now you have more of that. And then same with the items, that's always been a big part of OSR play is characters using and players using items intelligently and creatively. And this really, really reinforces that play. When you're not playing your sheet, you're playing your character. And obviously your feats will be written on the sheet of stuff. But the other cool thing is this simplifies the character sheet even further. This is already a very simple character sheet, which the goal is to be able to have a note card character sheet. You could fit 4 on a page and then print, cut it out, and hand those out. So now this section of the stats, you don't have to worry about that. Just take that out and you have even more space to use for writing notes, writing out feats. So now all you have to have on a character sheet is even easier. You can make your own in 20 seconds. You write down your name, your HP, your SP, your luck, your supply, your heritage, your jobs, your feats, and then your items and consumables with slots for their tier and their wear. So it's just like I'll show you up close. So this is what a character sheet looks like now. Very simple. So there's no staring at your character sheets and trying to figure out things in this game. It's, you keep keep your stuff written down as, for note taking and for reference, but you don't need to look at it during play because you'll know what your character could do. So the game stays above the table, not looking down at the table. So I'll try to wrap this up here. I know this was a lot. This was a big update because I've been just head down working on things and finalizing Kickstarter layout, pledge levels, all of that. The other big change, and let's see. So this isn't really relative or relevant to Tomb Runners because this was always going to be kind of an add-on. But the Dungeon Master's deck, we're no longer going to do the second edition as part of this campaign. We're going to keep Tomb Runners solely based on the book. We're gonna keep this campaign, tight for production reasons because the Dungeon Master's deck is a universal tool for fantasy RPG. It was created years ago, a couple years back, not part of Tomb Runners. It's a great supplement to use with Tomb Runners, but it is not part of Tomb Runners. This is going to be the next project. The second edition of the Dungeon Master's deck will be my next project following the Tomb Runners fulfillment. So that's just an update on that because some people might have been really waiting on that part of this, but that's not really, it's going to complicate timelines too much with production and fulfillment. So we're going to keep this campaign very simple. It's going to be the book, the Zine edition, the GM screen, and the dice. And that's it. The all-in pledge, you'll get it all. And it's going to be very affordable, very simple. We're not going to worry about having another product line as part of this campaign. And I think that's for the best for me and for backers of Tomb Runners. I thought it would be cool to do it all at once, but I think as basically a one-man operation here, I am working with, I hired artists for this, but they're not involved in the production fulfillment. And I am working with a marketing expert on all of this, but they are also kind of back end of things, not directly doing all of this. It's just a lot more manageable for me and lets me serve the backers in the campaign and the game more to keep it just on Tomb Runners here. It lets me keep the focus, narrow. So that's all for now. Still aiming for mid-July, maybe third week of July campaign launch. And that means I've got one more book prototype coming in this week. That's going to be the matte edition, the matte cover. And it's a little bit more cleaned up, a little more fixed with the layout here. And Then we've got the Zine edition in to do photos and videos with. And then got to get the prototype with the final art of the GM screen printed. And then we're good to go on the campaign and start doing, some social media outreach, some podcasts, YouTube, all of that kind of stuff. So let me know what you think. I know the tomb creation stuff is really fun. The spell crafting is a lot of fun. Probably my favorite addition to the game since the beta launch. I've had a lot of fun with that spell table, just thinking of ideas for items and characters. And let me know especially what you think of the statless system. Really, really narrowing the focus of the game to that action roll idea, which it was always, everything you did was always that action roll. But now taking away that stat play and characters are just acting in the ways that make sense to what abilities they have and their items, not what stats best for them, has really focused the game on that system in a way that works really well so far. And players are no longer trying to game the system. Instead, they're playing their characters in more fun ways. And the changes to character builds have really kept the power level, even though they lost advantage and they're rolling more flat D20s. There's more interesting outcomes with the success with the consequence outcome being more frequent, but also just cooler things are happening in the game as players have an extra feat to do more cool things and more stress to spend on those cool things. The game has really opened up instead of, like, it's simplified mechanically, and that simple focus has really broadened the gameplay, and it's a lot of fun. Now, a barbarian can pick up a scroll and they're going to use it because they don't have disadvantage on rolling it if they had negative on mind. Now they're like, oh, well, I have a good shot at rolling with this, of succeeding on this spell cast with this scroll. And alternatively, a lot of the feats have changed. I should have mentioned this earlier. The feats that were based on stats have obviously changed to be more universal. So the previous one, there was a fighter feat that had advantage on all resist rolls with brawn. If you were using brawn to do a resist roll, you got advantage. And that was just too strong when you usually would have plus in brawn if you took that feat anyways. So then you had double advantage on all brawn resist rolls. So you could basically spend 2 stress to roll off to basically negate any consequences in melee combat or whatever. Now that's just changed to you get advantage on resist rolls in melee combat. So it plays out mostly the same while taking away the stat requirement. But also now, like, a monk who doesn't have plus in brawn can still take that feat and be very effective as a melee fighter because they get advantage when they resist roll in melee combat, and it's not tied to a stat. So they still get the same effect and the same kind of play without having a requisite stat or being based on a stat. So that's an example of how, while it seems limiting, it's actually opening up the game and opening up options for characters. Similarly, there was one for the roguish feats that let them use or have advantage on all dexterity, and that's changed to be advantage on all resist rolls against ranged attacks. Very universal and simple, and while still providing the same type of effect and power for players. If you want to be, very, very strong tank, you could take both of those now, and you're no longer being penalized for not having advantage in both stats. Now you're just getting the power of both types of defense, giving up a lot of offense and other character build power to do that, but it is now an extra option. It's a broader set of options for all players while still giving that same type of power and effect. So that's the stat system playing out, and how it seems like it's limited the scope of the game or made the character samey, but in effect has actually done the opposite of that. And that's what I'm so excited about it. That's what's got me really excited about kind of a major fundamental change in the game. And it leans more into the taking the idea of like, what do the games I'm trying to capture feel like without making the game derivative of them, and going statless, classless, and narrative based with a fantasy RPG. That's pretty bold, I think. But as soon as players sit down and make their character, they don't say, oh, my character is the same as his or hers. They say, oh, my character can do all of this cool stuff. And I have all these items that lean into that kind of concept. And, from the first scene, they don't feel like they're playing a character that's the same as the rest of the table. They think they have their unique character. And they're right. And that's what's cool. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. Give me any feedback you have on the ideas. I will get the current playtest up on the Google Drive if you have the link. If not, drop me an email below. You can use a disposable email in the comments and I'll send it to you, or reach out on bsky and I will send you the playtest there. Thanks for watching. I should be getting some more regular videos going up here as we roll into the pre-launch and the launch of the campaign on crowdfunding. And once that's going, we'll be making daily content showing off the game and everything, of course. And so backers will have the whole reason I've been doing these videos is so that when the campaign launches, people can look back and see like the progress. And if people are really into it, they can watch these videos. Some of these videos are 30 minutes, an hour long, and they can really get a deep dive on the game and the design process. And this is also just a good, like I've mentioned before, this is good for me to talk through things. And especially as I get to the point where I'll be doing podcasts and interviews and stuff, talking through them out loud helps me put words to thoughts and be prepared for that as people have questions or want to know what was the thought behind these design choices or whatever. So appreciate it. I will talk to you soon, and I'll be back to share more later this week. Thanks.